Hey guys, this is Unknown from Notion Hub and this is OnePlus 9R camera review. Now before we start, here are the camera specs. Now this phone comes with 48 megapixel primary camera with f1.7 aperture and it has Sony IMX586 sensor. It also has optical and electronic image stabilization, followed by 16 megapixel ultra-wide camera with f2.2 aperture and it has IMX481 sensor and it comes with 123 degrees field of view, followed by 5 megapixel macro camera and finally 2 megapixel monochrome camera. On the front, it has 16 megapixel camera with f2.4 aperture and has Sony IMX471 sensor. It also has electronic image stabilization. So let's start off with selfies. These are the sample shots. Color reproduction is good and the skin tones look good. There is some post-processing going on. Dynamic range and exposure control are nice. Next, these are portrait selfies. Edge detection is pretty good most of the time. Color reproduction is pretty good and skin tones look good. There is some processing going on. Now these are selfies in low light. Now these look good and colors look decent. It is slightly grainy. Now this is a footage recorded on front camera. Footage is pretty stable, color reproduction is good, image is pretty sharp, exposure and dynamic range are pretty well managed. Now these are pictures taken from the rear camera. These have good exposure control and colors look saturated. Dynamic range is great, there is good sharpness. The color temperature is slightly on the cooler side. Next, these are wide angle shots, which are followed by regular shots. Exposure control and dynamic range are pretty good. Colors are oversaturated. Color temperature is on the cooler side. Next, it has macro shots. Now these are great and have good color reproduction. Next, these are portrait shots. Edge detection is pretty good. The color reproduction is good. Dynamic range and exposure are pretty well managed. Sharpness is also great. There are two angles here, the default portrait mode and the wide angle portrait mode. Generally, the default one is good for human subjects, while the wide angle portrait mode can be used in situations where the subject and even the background both are pretty important, like a scenery or a landscape that you want to capture, say like a beach. Next we have 48MP mode, and here's quick comparison between regular pictures and 48MP pictures. Next we have low light photos. In low lighting conditions, it does a decent job and it is slightly on the softer side. In complete darkness, if you take pictures with flash, it looks good, colors are pretty accurate and sharpness is also pretty good. Next we have wide angle low light photos. These are also similar to regular angle but are sharper and look better. Next we have night mode and these are the sample pictures. Overall, image is much brighter than before but still on the softer side. Indoors, it makes the picture look brighter. Next, these are the filters for night mode and they look good. Next, this is sample footage taken in 1080p resolution. It has electronic image stabilization and it is good. Exposure control and dynamic range are good. Color reproduction is nice, slightly faded, close to real life colors. Next, it has wide angle video. It has electronic image stabilization and it works. Next, it has super stable mode. Footage is pretty stable, colors are slightly on the dull side. Otherwise, it is pretty good. Next, this phone supports 4K video recording. And here's a sample footage, downscaled to 1080p resolution. Footage is pretty stable, exposure and dynamic range are nice. Color reproduction is also pretty good. Next, it has slow motion, and here's the sample footage. Next, it has nightscape mode for video. I recorded in complete darkness, so it made only slight difference. Very little was visible. So that's been the camera review for OnePlus 9R. Overall, the results are really nice. So what do you think about this phone? Let us know in the comments below. This is Unknown from Notion Hub. Meet you in the next one.